Welcome to Gotta Run. This is Will Sanchez. Thank you for tuning in. My very special guest today is David Liston. David is an honorary member of the New York Police Department running team. I met David years ago at the community board when he was the chair of the community board and I was the co-secretary, actually one of the co-secretaries. At that time it was three of us because it took three of us to keep pace with Dave. Dave is a double. What he does in a week takes two other people to do. I'm honored to have Dave as a guest.
Wow, thank you, Will. Thank you very much.
You know, I forgot to mention you have a very interesting gig. You wear many hats, but you're also the representative, the U.S. representative from the government of Gibraltar.
Right, right.
Well, we have to talk about that. But before we get there, let's introduce you to our audience in terms of, tell us where you were born, something about your growing up years.
Sure. And Will, thanks for having me on the show, by the way, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I've enjoyed working with you on the community board and watching the show, and it's exciting for me and humbling to be here on your show as your guest. I really feel grateful for that opportunity. As for my background, I'm a native New Yorker. I was born in New York at St. Vincent's Hospital, which I guess no longer exists. My family lived in Flushing, Queens. Eventually, we moved out to New Jersey. But as I like to say, I came back to New York as soon as I could. And no offense to New Jersey, it's a great state. I love visiting friends and family there.
Okay.
But I love New York.
Okay.
And when I was in my early 20s, I was fortunate enough to take a job with the Manhattan DA's office here in New York. And that required that I move into the city, which I was more than happy to do. That was in 1994. And I've never moved out of the city since.
Ah, so that implies you were a lawyer?
I'm afraid it does. Guilty, yes.
What kind of sports activities did you participate as a kid?
Almost none. I was not particularly athletic, to put it politely.
Okay.
Growing up, I was very skinny, and I don't think I was particularly athletically inclined or coordinated. I was a bit of a bookworm.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually a bit, as hard as it may be to believe, I was a bit introverted growing up, at least for part of the time. And then I guess years later, as sort of in my early 20s, I got kind of caught up in physical fitness. And
so you went to college to be a lawyer?
I went to Rutgers College in New Jersey to be a journalist. That was my dream. TV journalism or print, either one, but I was eager to be a reporter. And then I saw a movie called To Kill a Mockingbird.
Ah, the classic.
Classic. It changed my life. It certainly changed my direction. I saw that movie and I said, that's what I want to do.
Interesting. You know, they came out with not a sequel, but a prequel. You know,
They did.
discovered an earlier version of it.
Yeah, they did.
But what about TV programs like Perry Mason, or was that, I don't know, more recent ones?
Remember the show, of course, Law and Order?
Yes.
And I remember watching Law and Order and thinking, aha, I want to work at the Manhattan DA's office. I want to work for Robert Morgenthau. I want to work at the premier district attorney's office in the country.
Okay.
And that was my goal, and I'm so grateful I had that opportunity.
Okay. Well, how did that come about? Did you apply, or did they heard about your exploits?
And apparently they did not hear about my exploits, which is good. But I applied, and it was a difficult process. Lots of good people competing for very few slots. It's a real privilege to represent the people of the state of New York here in Manhattan. But I'm so happy that I was given that opportunity.
Okay, you were an assistant district attorney.
That's right.
And how many of you are there?
There are roughly between 400 and 500 assistant district attorneys on any given day in Manhattan.
Really? So you were
it's a
one
big
of 400,
office.
500?
Absolutely.
Well, the odds gets improved there. I had a feeling it was only one of a handful.
Well, so every year they hire an incoming class, anywhere from, say, 25 to 50 people.
I see. That's what the competition is.
So that's right.
Is that for a fixed term, or how long does it last?
You make a commitment to be there for at least 3 years. I was happy to be there for 5 years.
Okay. So after 3 years, they said, can you stay a little longer?
Well, they encouraged people to stay There's a lot of on-the-job training. There's a tremendous amount of investment that the city and the state put into every assistant DA. And the DA's office wants to know that you're not just coming in there for a few months or a year and then going back out and trying to do something else.
Just to spice up the resume.
Right, exactly.
3 years. Okay. Now, so did you have experience before you went to the DA?
No, I had been to law school and I had clerked for a judge for 1 year, but otherwise I had never tried a case.
Wow. I mean, that's a great learning experience. So did you develop expertise while you were there? Did you concentrate on certain aspects of the law?
Well, it was all criminal law, and I developed a lot of experience in court, speaking to juries, speaking to judges. I also developed a lot of experience dealing with people. You know, Manhattan is such a diverse place, and when you're a prosecutor, the types of crimes that you prosecute, the types of people that you prosecute, the types of victims whose cases you bring to the courts are so diverse. The juries are so diverse. And so I developed, I think, a very valuable experience speaking with, communicating with all kinds of people from all sorts of backgrounds in a way that, you know, was something they could understand and hopefully be persuasive. You know, the big difference between the DA's office and working at a law firm is that at the DA's office, you go to court almost every day, whether it be for arraignments, for trials, grand jury presentations, hearings. There's no better way to get experience on your feet in a courtroom, in my opinion, than a DA's office.
Oh, okay. You probably made a lot of friends with the police department because you're the DA, you have to work very closely with the police department, I presume.
Yeah, I think aside from the trial experience, which was very valuable and continues to be valuable to me today, there was the real sense of serving the public. And part of that meant working closely with the police department, side by side, pursuing the guilty and trying to protect the innocent. And I developed some close relationships with a number of police officers and precincts. And those relationships continue to this day, I'm happy to say.
Right. I mentioned at the beginning that you're an ordinary member of their running team.
Right.
So at some point, physical fitness became more important to you.
It did.
So tell us how that happened.
So let's see. I was at the Manhattan DA's office, and a dear friend of mine passed away. This is a timely topic given Senator McCain's terrible news. My friend developed brain cancer and suffered tremendously and died a terrible death far too young. And I thought to myself, how can I honor her memory? How can I commemorate the gifts that she brought to the world? And the idea that I had, and I discussed it with her family, was that we would raise money for a scholarship, and the way we would do it would be to run the New York City Marathon. It was a tremendous challenge because I had never run anything like that distance before in my life. And as I mentioned, I was not particularly athletic, but it was a tremendous goal and a big challenge and a worthy cause. And I threw myself at it, and I also got a dear friend of mine, also from the DA's office, to do it with me. And we raised money from folks who would pledge per mile for every mile run. And we also got folks to commit that my friend Dan and I, if we could come in under 4 hours for our first marathon, then everyone would double or triple their pledges.
My God, that's very ambitious. So how did you do? We're edge of our seats.
I'm happy to say I finished the marathon, which is something I was glad about, and I did it in 3 hours and 50 minutes. And my friend, remember, we both had to complete. We both had to. This was something I came up with at the last minute. I said, let's make it so that folks will double or triple, I can't remember which, their pledges, so long as both of us did it under 4 hours. However, if one of us didn't, then all the doubling or tripling was done. So Dan, God bless him, he completed the marathon in 3 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds, which I consider to be very efficient.
That is darn efficient. If this were a movie, it would have been unbelievable.
That's right.
Well, I think that was one of 8 or 9 marathons have you done?
So that was my first marathon.
And did you do that with part of the New York Police Department?
I did.
So you wore their shirt?
I wore their shirt, and I felt so honored to be able to do that. I have tremendous respect for the police and for what they do, and the risks that they take and the things they do to protect us. And the chance to run with them in the marathon for a good cause especially was great. And I ended up kind of getting hooked on running and on fitness and on running for a good cause. So I ran the marathon, I think it was 5 years in a row or 6 years in a row, year after year, always for that same scholarship that I mentioned, always with the NYPD team.
Okay.
Progressively slower every year. I'm not sure what that was about. And then at some point, I didn't keep up with it.
Okay. You took a hiatus because I think you're back.
Yes, now I'm back. It's lovely how many people, I think, get involved in marathons to support a charity. I think my story is not unique.
That's true.
And because I think you're very disciplined and I think you're very focused on fitness year in and year out, no matter what happens. I can't say the same. I was very good at this for a few years. And then at some point, I let work and other things in my life take over. And I didn't leave enough room to run, to train. And I stopped running marathons until about 3 years ago when a good friend of mine, a guy named Yannick Benjamin, who was a very well-regarded sommelier, a wine expert. And he was working at a place that I was having dinner at with my wife, Sarah, and I had some wine, and he got me at just the right moment because I was feeling the effects of the wine. And he came up to me and he said, would you consider running the marathon for a charity that I'm involved with, an organization I'm helping to run?
Out of the blue?
Out of the blue.
You look like a marathoner to him.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I don't know. Yannick is involved in something called Wheeling Forward.
Okay.
And Wheeling Forward is an organization that helps people who are in wheelchairs get involved in physical fitness. You know, you and I we take it for granted that we can walk into any gym and grab any piece of equipment and almost always use it. Physical fitness is relatively accessible to us, notwithstanding the scheduling issues and the fees and all the things. But if you're in a wheelchair, you have a bigger challenge, right?
Yeah.
And so he came up with an organization, Wheeling Forward, and the Access Project. And essentially, they come up with ways for people who otherwise might not be able to surf, skydive, participate in marathons, get physically fit, do a Zumba. You know, they come up with ways to adapt activities that all of us would like to do and many of us enjoy, but that normally would not be accessible to someone in a wheelchair. So it's a great organization. And every year, Yannick and his colleagues in this group complete the marathon, many of them in wheelchairs. And he offered me the chance to run the marathon and help raise money. And I said, I'll do it. And he knew I'd had 3 glasses of wine. And he said, you know, why don't you think about it? I said, I don't need to think about it. He said, well, come back in 3 days and let me know if you still feel the same way. Because if I say I'm going to do something, I generally do it.
I know. You're a tremendous achiever in that way. That is a fantastic story. And Lady Liston was there witnessing it.
Yes.
Was there a story in meeting her?
One of the best things about being at the Manhattan DA's office is meeting my wife, Sarah. Sarah worked as a trial preparation assistant and then as a spokeswoman for Mr. Morgenthau. And it was at the DA's office that I was lucky enough to meet her. We started to date, we got engaged, we got married, and we just celebrated our 16th anniversary.
Wow. Something important happened. I think the anniversary is coming up. Your wife was in a terrible accident.
Yes.
On the FDR?
Yes.
Tell us about this.
You've got a good memory, Will. The anniversary of that is coming up this Tuesday. 9 years ago this Tuesday, Sarah was on a Vespa and looking beautiful in a dress, driving down the FDR on her Vespa. I'm sure she looked like someone right out of a movie. The helmet on, thank goodness. But that movie sort of turned into a horror movie. She was struck by a vehicle. Two drivers apparently were racing on the FDR, one with the other, and one of them just grazed her handlebar. But at that speed, it was enough to send her flying, and she skidded across the FDR and was burned up from the friction very badly and suffered very bad break to her arm, and she ended up with 13 screws in her arm. And it was a very difficult experience for her and for anyone who loves her.
Yes. I remember the email coming out, maybe from the board office. about Sarah, and everybody was on pins and needles, and I think you
Yeah.
took time off to
I think
take
I
care of
did.
her.
In fact, she had to have care every day for the burns, and I spent a lot of time at home with her. But it was, like a lot of bad things, it presents opportunities as well.
You got to spend more quality time than you thought was possible.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time together, and also we enjoyed the support of people like you and friends on the community board and in the neighborhood. And experiences like that can make you realize how lucky you are in many ways.
Yes. So the good news is she made a full recovery.
She did.
And she's back on the Vespa.
And Will, she was for a while.
She did go back on?
She got back on it, which I think takes a lot of courage.
Just to prove she can do it, I
to
guess.
prove, and she stayed on it for probably another year or two. But a lot of our friends and family were kind of discouraging her from that. One day it clicked in her head and she said, I'm not going to push my luck.
Okay. Oh, that's so glad that happy ending. But then, maybe 2 years later, I think maybe for another charity, you were put on the boxing gloves.
Yes. Yes.
And you look great, and you got the name Liston.
Yeah.
But unlike Sonny Liston, what happened?
I was invited to participate in a boxing match to raise money for the Sarcoma Foundation. And I was invited to train at a place called Trinity Boxing Club with two great guys, Martin Snow and John Snow, who are still dear friends of mine. And it was a chance to learn about something completely new. I had never boxed before in my life. And I got into, I think, probably the best shape of my life, physically and mentally. It was an incredibly empowering experience, challenging in so many ways. All of it was great until actually the week before the boxing match. The week before, I was sparring with someone, as you do when you're training for a match like that. And I was hit on the right side of my head, and I suffered what turns out to have been a subdural hematoma, which can be very serious.
Oh.
And the only thing worse than a subdural hematoma is a subdural hematoma that goes undetected. And it went undetected for a week despite a number of different tests. And because it was undetected, and because I am, as my wife can tell you, a very stubborn person, for better or worse, I proceeded with the boxing match, although I was in tremendous pain. I made it through the whole boxing match. I made it three-minute rounds, but I don't remember a lot of it. My brain was shutting down during the match, it turns out. And as it turns out, I was taken to Bellevue Hospital immediately after the match. I had pins and needles in the left side of my body. The right side of your brain controls the left side of your body, as I now know.
So you felt the pins and
I
needles?
felt pins and needles, and then I didn't feel anything. Then I couldn't move my left arm. Then I couldn't see. Everything went black. And at the hospital, they told my wife, he has a very serious subdural hematoma. The good news is we're treating it right away. It's probably 50-50 that it'll make it.
50-50, those are not good odds.
It's not good odds, but that's when they thought I had just gotten it that night.
Oh.
It turns out I had it for an entire week. It went untreated for a week. I entered that ring that night with a fatal condition that I'm sure did not get any better by fighting for 3 rounds.
So, by the grace of God, you're sitting here.
Yes, and I feel very grateful to be here.
Now, are you a religious person, or are you now?
Well, if I wasn't, I would be now. But yeah, I am a deeply spiritual person, and an experience like that. I'll tell you a story. One of the neurologists who worked with me throughout that experience said to me, this is a miracle. We didn't think you were going to make it. And we thought for sure if you made it, you would lose the power of speech. Your personality would be dramatically different. Turns out all I have is the power of speech and my personality. So to have lost either or both of those would have been pretty bad.
That is a miracle.
He said to me, I used to be an atheist and now I'm an agnostic. That's what he told me.
Because he came through.
That's right.
Well, you'd think prayer had something to do with it?
Yeah, I think so. I did some praying, and I know some loved ones were around me praying, and I think that helped.
Your wife must have been annoyed. I just got out of this accident she had, and there you are lying in bed, 50-50. That must have been very scary. Did that change your life, your lives after that? Did you make an adjustment? Did you swear you were going to live life to the fullest?
My wife, Sarah, would tell you that I have become, ever since then, more patient and that she says I'm funnier for some reason. But I do know that an experience like that makes you take a step back and put things in perspective. And the things that might be so important to you aren't so important anymore. And the things that you take for granted, you no longer take for granted. So I think in many ways that was a good experience. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, and I wouldn't do it again. But I think I probably did come out of it with a better sense of perspective.
Okay, so you're not going back into the boxing ring anytime soon?
No, although I still sometimes train with Trinity Boxing with Martin Snow. That training is so valuable, and although I don't punch people and nobody punches me, the jumping rope, the push-ups, the calisthenics, the technique of boxing, I still find very special and valuable.
Yeah, a skilled boxers is a beautiful thing to watch with the movement of the feet and the hands, the hand-eye coordination. But you also do other things. You take like a 30-day challenge where you every day for 30 days you do something athletic.
Right. Let me say this again, Will. What I admire about you is you're steady. I see you as someone who you don't do it for 30 days. You do it for 30 years. So I have greater respect for you and for folks who do this every day. What I'm good at, for better or worse, are sort of these peaks and valleys. You know, I will dedicate myself to the boxing. For 1 year, I worked my butt off. For the marathon, I'll wait to the last minute, but maybe 2 or 3 months before, I will throw myself into it 500%. So every so often, as you know, I will say, okay, for 30 days, I'm going to work out every day. And I get friends to do it with me, because sometimes it helps to have support.
Yeah.
And it's one day it might be yoga, another day it might be a run, another day it might be a swim. I mix it up.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It's so much fun. It's so much fun. I really
Especially when we do it with friends. And then after the 30 days, what happens? You go, okay, back to my old ways?
All too often, I'm embarrassed to admit, all too often I have slipped right back into another valley of just eating too much, working too much, sleeping too little, exercising too little. But as I get older, and as I look back on the experience I had with the boxing and Sarah's experience with the Vespa, I'm reminded that we're only here for a short time, and our lives are so fragile. And so I will say I'm getting better at, I think, striking a better balance with fitness.
All right. Tell us about your work with Trinity Church.
Oh, it's one of my favorite topics, Will. I am president of the Holy Trinity Neighborhood Center, which is associated with the Church of the Holy Trinity, but it's a non-denominational organization. It's made up of neighbors and volunteers from all around the city, of all walks of life, of all religious backgrounds. We work with all kinds of mosques and temples, and you name it. Anyone is welcome to work with us. And side by side with our neighbors, we feed our neighbors and we shelter our neighbors. And it's something that I get a great deal of joy from.
And you've been doing this for how long?
Oh gosh, I guess about 15 years.
15 years. Oh, this predates, your accidents, so this is something you done for a long time.
Yes.
It seems more like a calling, because that is so special to be able to do that week after week after week, and that's your consistency right there.
I will say that I'm consistent with.
Okay. Now you have a very interesting current new gig for you. I guess you have relatives in Gibraltar.
Yes.
I've sailed past Gibraltar a few years ago on a cruise ship. And that was the time I learned that actually there are people behind that rock.
Right.
I think I always thought Prudential owned that rock or something.
Right.
So tell us the misconception. So tell us, what is Gibraltar?
The Rock of Gibraltar is on the tip of Spain. It's at the crossroads of Africa and Europe. It's where the Mediterranean and the Atlantic Ocean meet. In many ways, it's at the crossroads of the world. It is a very, very small place with a very small group of people living there.
But a big rock.
But it's a big rock, and its impact in the world is almost disproportionate to its size. It's sort of become a symbol. Prudential has used it as a symbol. The Greeks used it as a symbol. It has been used as a symbol of sort of resilience, resolve, fortitude. It is a part of the United Kingdom. It is a British overseas territory, which means that it has many of the benefits of being part of the United Kingdom. But on the other hand, it is almost entirely self-governing. The people of Gibraltar are a unique people. They are culturally distinct. They have aspects in their life from Spain, Italy, Genoa, Malta, Britain, Ireland. So many different countries and people have contributed to what Gibraltar is. My grandparents came from Gibraltar. They emigrated from there to the United States in the 1920s during the Great Depression. They taught me to love Gibraltar, and my mother took me there as a young person. I fell in love with it, the people and the place, and I have been actively advocating for Gibraltar in a number of different ways. And most recently, I was appointed the U.S. representative of Her Majesty's Government of Gibraltar. So I represent Gibraltar here in the United States.
Wow, so almost like an ambassador.
Yes, yes,
Do
indeed.
you have offices in Washington?
No, not yet, but who knows? Maybe someday.
Okay, so where's your office?
Actually, I work out of my office in the Chrysler Building. I just got back from a trip to Gibraltar.
Okay.
My office is also in the U.S. Capitol, where I've gone to advocate for Gibraltar with members of Congress.
Okay. Have you been to the White House yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But it sounds like, it's a 300-year, I think they just celebrated a 300-year, is it independence or 300 years
So
of being
Gibraltar has been a part of the United Kingdom for over 300 years. For a brief period of time, Gibraltar was part of Spain, and prior to that, it was controlled by people from Morocco.
Wow. So
And I got you a gift.
our audience should look this up. It's a very interesting place.
And I brought you a gift, Will. I did. This is, of course, you know that flag, and that's the flag of Gibraltar.
Oh.
And I brought this for you.
Well, thank you so much. That's so beautiful.
Maybe you can wear it on a run someday.
Yeah, so beautiful. I noticed that there is a very special run at Gibraltar, to run up the rock.
That's right.
Have you done it yet?
I've run around the rock, which is not easy. It's about a little bit under 8 miles around, but it's hilly. And it's beautiful. It's very scenic. The rock is a beautiful place, and you've got the Atlantic on one side, you've got the Mediterranean on the other, because the rock sticks out from Spain. So you get to run along 2 different bodies of water.
Wow,
But
unique.
I have not done the run up the rock, but now you've got me thinking about it.
I think it's an annual event because I saw the video. They had Superman running it up.
Oh, is that right? Maybe you and I should do it someday.
Interesting. I think my wife would love to do that.
Good.
Okay, on that note.
Thanks for having me on the show.